Welcome to Phil Wilson Chats with Celebrities. And here's your host, Phil Wilson.
Chaz Jankel is an English musician and songwriter in a career spanning more than 40 years. He came to prominence in the late 70s as a guitarist and keyboardist of Ian Dury and the Blockheads. Chaz scored the music soundtrack for the 1988 movie D.O.A, which is Dead on Arrival. It starred Dennis Quaid and a very young Meg Ryan, and the score has been unavailable for 25 years. And now, after countless requests, I am pleased to announce it is here, reimagined and remastered, and the multi-talented and charming Chaz Jankel joins us now. How are you doing, Chaz?
I'm doing great, thanks, Phil. That was a huge intro, wasn't it? I mean, the only thing that was missing was a drum roll, wasn't there?
That's what I was just going to say. That Ching Chaz, here he is. But yes, a very, very busy musical career, and so far, your amazing career has brought to us some of the most recognisable music and songs. Now, when did you write your first song, and can you remember how it went?
Wow. Well, I'm going way back here, but the first single I released under my own name was called One Morning, One Evening. And the producer who was involved in it, Stuart Taylor, he had, he was kind of working at the publishing company. So I had a deal with a band I was playing with called Byzantium. We'd signed to A&M. This was in the early 70s, and the management they looked after Rod Stewart. So many people. The Faces.
Wow.
Oh, gosh. The names go out of my head right now, but there was a lot of big acts. Long John Baldry was one of them as well.
Yes.
And, actually, he did the first cover I had, a song called Let's Go. It was on an album called Good to Be Alive.
Right.
So that was my first cover. But the first song I released on my own name was called One Morning, One Evening. And as I said, the producer hadn't got any musicians for the session, which was coming up the next day. And somehow he blagged Diana Ross's backing musicians who were playing at the Royal Albert Hall. He snuck in there, managed to grab them. So the next day we did this session with all the, with her backing group, her live.
Wow, amazing.
That was quite something, yeah. And the B-side was called Let's Work It Together. And I don't know whether you're a keyboard player or a musician yourself, but
yes, drummer.
There was a very funky clavinet part on it. Probably the best part about the song, really. The song wasn't fantastic, but at least I had one out there, as I say. And that was my, I think that was my debut as an artist.
And the song that Long John Baldry sung, was it an emotional one? Like he's
not at all.
Legs begin. Not at all. I can't help it.
Actually, it was the only 12 bar that blues that I've ever released. And it was called Let's Go, and it was all about getting out of the city and getting into the countryside. And I had a red Mini at the time, so I said, let's get my, I can't remember the exact lyric, but get my Mini and off I go. But he was 6'7", right? So no way could he get into a Mini. Also, I think it was a bit sort of drab for him, so he changed it to a '67 Chevy.
Right.
I mean, we actually never even met in person, but that was good enough for me. That was my first cover. Yeah.
Excellent. I'll have to hunt that one down. I haven't heard that one yet. We'll have to add that to the.
It's on the Good to Be Alive album.
Good to Be Alive album. Cool. Yeah. Long John Baldry. Excellent. Yeah. I'll hunt that one down for the Vinyl Revival show, which we'll be talking about vinyl a little bit later on, Chaz. Now, is music something that was in you at an early age?
I assume so, because I was about 5 years old, and my parents rented a piano for my elder brother Tony, who's 2 years older than me. And I think they just wanted to see whether he was interested. Well, I don't think he was, but I was, because I I was pretty small then, so I sort of reached up for the keyboard and I hit a few notes, and I thought, oh, that show, he's interested.
Yeah.
And that was nice. So then pretty soon after that, they rented a piano. But actually, I think before that happened, I got a guitar, Spanish guitar for my 7th birthday, a little Selma acoustic guitar.
Wow.
I had a Spanish guitar teacher who spoke no English. I spoke no Spanish. And I think she got a little bit exasperated with me at times. Not only the fact that we couldn't speak the same language, I just think I wasn't really practicing quite like I should.
Yeah.
Little while after that, my parents did rent a piano, and I started playing piano as well. So from the age of 7, Phil, basically they've been my best mates ever since that. Even till this day, I struggle to think, oh, what should I go to next, my guitar or the piano? Yeah.
So was that the first instrument that you picked up, the Spanish guitar?
Yeah.
That you picked up and sat down and played and
Yeah.
really got into?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was. Yeah. I can
Yeah,
remember my first chord. And for those who are interested, it's a G7 where you place your finger on the first fret of the top E string, and if you just play the top 3 strings, you get a G7. And that was it. I was off. That was it.
That's it.
The
You
ship
got the
had
bug.
set sail.
Excellent. Well, David Payton of Pilot, he was inspired by the Spanish guitar, except it was a different kind of stories. He was actually over there. I don't know if it was in Madrid or wherever, where they do all the bulls race through the town, and all that. And there was this little lad sitting on a step, and he was playing the Spanish guitar, and he said he just sat there and he just listened to this little lad playing this guitar, and that's what started him off. So you've got a bit of something in common there with the Spanish guitar there.
Yeah,
Use rock and rollers.
Yes. And then I remember my parents went what was it? They went on a holiday to Morocco, Tangier. That's right. They went to Tangier,
Right.
and they came back with this little instrument that had a very thin neck, and all I can imagine was a tortoise shell down one end,
Right.
and it had 3 strings on it, and it's a bit twangy, but that was my first introduction to sort of Middle Eastern music, and I didn't know what
Yeah.
I hadn't even heard any, but I remember that feeling quite exotic at the time as well.
Wow.
So
And
that was, yeah. I've still got it.
Sorry, as I was saying, you've still got it, have you?
I've still got it somewhere. Yeah.
Oh, you'll have to bring it. You'll have to bring it on the show next
I'll
time.
bring
and
it on
let
the show
us-
next time. Yeah.
Definitely, it'd be lovely to see that and see what sound it makes.
It's only about that big. It's not a long one, but it's
Yeah.
and there must be a name for it, but I'm not quite. I don't have it to hand at the moment.
Amazing. Yes, we'll get that one from you, Chaz, for you to play on the next time. Now, you were born in Stanmore in Middlesex on the 16th of April, 1952. And I've read you were a big fan of skiffle, and of course, the godfather of the genre himself, Lonnie Donegan.
Of course.
What
yeah.
was it that you liked about Lonnie?
I tell you what I liked about Lonnie, and it might sound a bit banal, but what I liked about it was the fact that he had something that was horizontal to his body. And I thought, what is that? It's not a cricket bat. What is that? Oh,
Yeah.
it's a guitar. And I just liked the look of it. I liked the fact that he always looked happy. So I thought, well,
Yes.
what he's doing, it must, it's not boring then, is it?
No.
And and I think basically I just liked the image of it, really. That was what captured me. At that point, I think the music came secondary to basically just the good vibes he was putting out, really. Yeah.
And of course, it was so raw as well, the sound. Maybe that's something that that draws people in as well, because there's been never anything like that since, if you know what I mean. Especially with the banging on the box and things like that, and all of the washboard, and
That's
all
true.
the other kind of things,
I mean, you got a band like the Stray Cats who made it
Yes.
they popularized rockabilly, and to this day you've got a lot of kind of, I don't know, subgenres, but I think you could, when you hear like bands like what Wilco was doing, and the Dr. Feelgoods, that kind of R&B, funny enough, seems quite similar almost in a way to skiffle to my ears.
Yes.
Ding da ding da ding. It's that beat.
You're right. Yeah.
Although it might be there's a lot more electric guitars and distortion and cymbals involved, but I think you might find its roots aren't a lot dissimilar to rockabilly, which
Yes.
makes me wonder, did that come out of like the deep south of America really originally? Maybe it did. there's so many. When you think how big America is, and you know, styles ferment, don't they, in different
They
parts
do.
of the world? And then and as we know, musicians, to get work, they used to travel. So then they would take their style, and that would eventually mix with another style from another part of America, and then you've got these hybrid kind of sounds coming out, I think.
You have. And of course, now you see with the internet and such like, all of these styles hopefully are going to come into fruition, because really I tend to find that there's same old stuff out there, and we need a bit more of the world music sound coming in.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I've tried putting bagpipes in a funk tune, and it's really hard, though. You know, I mean, it's really. I know what you're saying. I love the idea, but some instruments, it's hard to find a place for them
Yeah.
because, you know, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
they might make a bit of a twang or something,
I love
which
the
doesn't
principle
fit.
of it. I love the principle of it, and I think we should all, as artists and musicians, not look for the obvious, not look for the plastic. Go beyond, behind that. Be a bit more mysterious with our craft. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah,
Definitely. World music, yes, get more of that out there.
yeah.
Now, was Lonnie Donegan someone you aspired to be like at the time?
Not really, not at all. I think that went on to me listening to the Shadows. Apache was one of the first tracks I loved.
Wow.
Then I sort of, I suppose, got into Cliff Richard, but I was very young, and so my love really, and I suppose that was quite pretty raw. When I started into the Beatles and Love Me Do and all those songs, very raw.
Yeah.
Just a
Yeah.
harmonica, guitar, very straightforward. I loved all that kind of very early Beatles stuff. That I was pretty much hypnotized by all of that, and all that carried on in its own sweet way until I got to about 14, and a cousin of mine on holiday in Spain had a little portable record player, and she had, amongst other singles, she had Lee Dorsey, and the
Right.
single was "Working Down a Coal Mine," working down
Oh,
a
yes, I
coal
love that
mine,
one.
going downtown, yeah, working down a coal
Yes.
mine. Whoops, it's
Whoops, about to slip down.
down, exactly.
I love it.
But this is the crucial point. If you flipped it over, the B side was a track called "Get Out My Life, Woman," and it had a wicked drum intro that went boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, and it cracks into the song "Get Out My Life, Woman." And I thought, what's that? What's that? That sounds incredible. And indeed, what it was a backbeat. Boom, crack, boom, boom, crack.
Wow.
Hard to hear in English music at that point. I'd never really heard anything like that, as soulful as that. And that really changed the direction of where I was looking and for music. I then started really kind of, suppose, looking into Afro-American music.
Yeah.
I was still into the Faces. I was still into the Who. You know, I got into the more English blues acts. So, you know, blues-oriented acts. But then as I say, I was getting much more into soul music. And I remember when Sergeant Pepper's came out, and, you know, it was this big sort of, you know, sort of furore, if that's the right word. Everyone was going, oh, you know, this is the best thing I've ever heard. And in fact, I've just found out recently that's the first album that had lyrics printed on it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I never knew that, but it
Wow.
apparently was.
Amazing.
But I don't know. For me, that I'm first listening, I thought, where's the Beatles gone? This is a very big production thing here.
Yeah.
And I, just like as you were saying, I mean, I was more into the raw sound of things, you know, I liked that in fact more than this very sort of highly developed, polished production sound. However, I could acknowledge it was brilliantly done.
Yes.
But as I say, I was still very much listening to the more soulful side of things. And what happened, Phil, was I left school in 1970, and round about that time, I had been listening to Sly and the Family Stone, and really
Right.
into their music, and they released a single called "Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again." That was in brackets. The "Thank You" was just the main title, and I thought, well, I better go and have a listen to it. So I went up to this little record shop just off Charing Cross in London, Charing Cross Road in London.
Yeah.
And it was in the days where you could, there was a booth next to the main counter, and there was a couple
Yeah.
and you could put on some headphones, right? And
Yeah.
you put on a single, and I did that. And I thought, well, I don't know about this. It's a bit boring, isn't it? It all stays in one key. It doesn't change anything, does it? Anyway, I thought, well, I better get it just in case and so I'll get it. I've come all this way. I'll get it. It was a 45. So I took it home, put it on my little record player next to my bed, and I'll never forget it. And I'm listening to it. I thought, I don't know. I don't know what the fuss is about. I played it again. I thought, not sure about this. Put it on again. I went, hang on a moment. This is brilliant, And I went, oh my God. And then to this day, Phil, I think it's the greatest piece of funky music I've ever heard. It's just like they captured such a vibe, and it was uplifting. It was very clever, but at the heart of it was this interaction, and it was very nuanced in a way. It was very very sophisticated, but raw at the same time, and so that made me feel amazing, actually. And you know what it's like when you hear a great piece of music. It just makes you feel good, doesn't it? It makes you feel,
it elates you. It's an indescribable feeling, really. It's like I was just converting a record, a Jack Jones record, and for some reason it had a little piece towards the end, and it's like a slight little bit of orchestra, and it just slightly changes key. And that little bit, I had to hear it a few times because it gives a little bit of a feeling. Like, I like that. I don't know why, but I like it. So now I'm going to add that to my playlist for Vinyl Revival. But it's funny how music can, certain types of music and things, it can be a certain bit of a melody, or it can be a certain bit of a bass line or something that can spark an emotion inside of you, and you go, I like that.
I know, and you can't even really put a finger on it. There is a piece of music which absolutely, God forbid I leave this planet too soon. However, one of the pieces of music I think I wouldn't mind being played at my, after I'm no longer on this planet, would be, there's a fantastic classical composer called Bruch, and he wrote a violin concerto, his famous violin concerto, and the second movement of Bruch's violin concerto is so beautiful, and it's so simple. It goes da 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 da. Anybody who loves violin or loves like adagios will go, oh yes, I know that. It's a very famous piece. However, it's so simple, and just those notes just send me into raptures. I just start staring out the window, looking at the bigger picture, and I'm away with the fairies.
It is. It's amazing. It's amazing how the music does affect you and things. It is absolutely wonderful. Because everybody's different, That's why everybody's got different tastes in music. We must be all tuned to different frequencies, stuff that we enjoy there. Now, the Jack Jones song there that I was saying, it was either Now I Know or it was More and More. I think it was Now I Know from 1967 on London Records. That's the tune that I quite like, and it's just, I'd never heard the song before, and it was just, I like that. So if anybody wants to have a listen to that there, see if the same effect happens to you.
Tell me again, Phil. What was it? 1967.
So it's 1967, and I think it's called Now I Know by Jack Jones, and the B side is More and More. But I think it's the Now I Know that is the A side, which is the one that's got that lovely little key changing. Very strange for brass to just.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I'll check it out after this show. Yeah.
Check it out, and then you can put a little comment on the YouTube or whatever, and you can say, I got that little feeling as well there.
Yeah, and I can say, now I know.
Now you know.
Now I know all about it.
That's right. I was rustling about there while you were talking there. Do apologise, because I wanted to, it's nice to let people know what it's all about. Like, we're going to get that instrument of yours on the show next time as well, so people know about that, you see. Now, did you have any other jobs before becoming a composer and a songwriter, Chaz?
I love that. No one's asked me that question, actually, ever.
That's good. I'm pleased.
I like that. Well, I did, actually. I had a job where I used to deliver ether in little files all over London. I was working for this company that was based in Alperton, which was near Wembley, and
Right.
I wore one of those biscuit coloured overcoats, like no over, and I used to
Like Ronnie Barker in Open All
You
Hours.
got it. That was me. And I used to travel all over London and the suburbs in this little pale blue transit van, and
Great.
and I hate, I don't know if I should repeat this on the program, but I thought every now and again, I thought, what happens if you spray a little bit of this stuff on your wrist? And it immediately went numb, And I had to shake my hand a bit. Obviously, it wasn't the hand that was holding the steering wheel. But,
Yes.
I had to find out. But anyway, that lasted a few months. I mean, to be honest, you probably much better getting up early in the morning. I'm not an early riser. So to get there for whatever 8 o'clock in the morning, these horrendously long hours. I'd sort of crawl out of there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and that was way before sat nav as well. So I'm telling you, I arrived late a lot of the time at these places because I'd be winding down the window. Excuse me, do you know where such and such is? And these sort of chemists in the back of nowhere. Like the back of beyond. So that was
Wow.
jobs. Oh, okay. 2 other significant jobs.
Yeah.
One was at the lighting department in John Lewis in Oxford Street, which is more like an episode of Are You Being Served, to be honest. It was very camp, I think is the right the PC word, I think.
Yeah.
And so that was memorable. And then later on, one other job I remember was I'd got into debt slightly because I'd produced an artist, and I was so naive. I thought this artist was actually kind of managed by somebody else, and I thought, well, if I go in and produce this artist, he can pay for it. So I didn't pay for it. I said at the end of the session, I'll just bill it to this manager. He was having none of it. He said, "You've got to pay for this, mate." I didn't, I mean, I didn't even know about the session. Anyway, I said, "Okay, granted." Okay, well, my brother, who I mentioned earlier, Tony, he's very sort of, exact and so forth. He said, and he looked through the newspaper. He said, "Oh, there's sales in the Christmas New Year's sales. There's a job at Harrods in the working department." And I went, "Really?" Oh, and he went, "Yeah, you could go and do that." Can you imagine? It's like your dad telling you something. It was my brother. Anyway, off I went. But funny enough, I'd met Ian Dury at that point. I think just about when I met Ian Dury, and he was contemplating getting a job there as well as a lift attendant, which would have been hilarious if he had.
I could imagine him on the lifts, with all the get up on there.
Ladies' lingerie, children's toys. Yeah.
That's right, going up.
Yeah. Well, that never happened. But my job did. I tell you, it was the longest 2 weeks of my life. It was horrific because there were just the monetary system was just changing over to, what do we call it, metric. No.
Yes, from the decimalization or whatever.
No longer were the same amount of pennies in a. It was horrendous. So I was forever going up to, when people ask me, "Listen, I've got a room by such and such, 18 by 14 feet, and I've got a carpet this size." Oh my Lord, I was in trouble. And I used to have to go up to another assistant and say, "Excuse me, you can help me." And I tell you, 99 times out of 100, say, "No, I'm sorry, I'm with a customer," and they'd go. And I tell you, at the end of it, I had about 25p, after tax, after 2 weeks. It was horrific.
Horrendous. That's hilarious.
I knew that wasn't the way forward for me.
No. And by the way, in the lighting department there, did you get plenty of electric shocks? I used to get lots of electric shocks when I used to go to John Lewis and where the lights are and everything. If you touched any of the metal bits where they would have all of the stuff displayed, I used to get electric shock. So now I'm so frightened because of that experience when I was younger. I don't touch anything metal because I get a shock.
All because of John Lewis as well.
All because of John Lewis, the lighting department. Well, or maybe it was the lights in their carpet.
I know, I know. I
The
mean,
posh carpet.
ah, you might be right. Yeah, you often get static, don't you? You can touch
You
the
do.
car door and you get static, or
Yeah.
yeah,
Very unusual.
I know. Weird, isn't it? But yeah, well, unfortunately, that's way in the past now, and I mean, it all ended actually. Well, yeah, the John Lewis and the Harrods experience, and then I mean, fortunately, things picked up. I mean, um, I played in a few small with lots of different musical outfits. I mentioned Byzantium. I did a few other things. Tim Hardin. I worked with him for a little bit, a singer songwriter from America.
Right.
And but then eventually I met Ian, and that helped. It changed my life really. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Yes, thank goodness you didn't get that job as working the lifts in Harrods.
Yeah, yeah.
Because otherwise the next question would be totally not relevant. Because in 1977, the Blockheads formed with you playing guitar and keyboards, Chaz. How did the band form?
So the band formed because I was demoing. So as I just said, I met Ian. I yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was just distracted for a moment. I met Ian, and that was the last formation of Kilburn and the High Roads. So it was called
Yes.
Ian Dury and the Kilburns. I passed an audition, joined that band. We were together for about 9 months. Ian was the king of the pub circuit. And I said
Yeah.
to Ian one day, I said, listen, mate, do you fancy writing some songs? Because, as I was saying earlier, it was kind of, dare I say, it was pub rock, although it hadn't been
Yeah.
coined that phrase at the time.
Yeah.
It was kind of like R&B-ish, but English R&B, quite sort of raw. But I'd been listening to a lot more soul music, and I wanted to bring a bit of that into the picture. So
Yeah.
he went, yeah, but he went, yeah, Chaz, let's do that. Let's write some songs. So he turned down quite a lot of gigs, and he went into writing mode. Out of that writing mode came songs such as Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
That was one of the earliest songs we wrote. And so we went down to a little demo studio in Wimbledon, and called Alvic, and that was run by Alan Vick.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you get the picture. And to
I
this
do.
day, I can't remember if it was Al or Vic, or one of them said, "Hey, listen, lads," he said, because Ian was playing drums and singing, and I was playing all keyboards, guitar, bass, and we were all right, but it wasn't
Yeah.
astounding what we were doing. And he said, "I know this great rhythm section called Charlie Charles and Norman Watt-Wright. They're hiring themselves out. Really good bass player, drummer. Why don't you give them a shot?" Yeah, great. So the next time we went into that studio, we demoed three songs. I don't remember what the other two were, but we certainly demoed a song called Blockheads that Ian had written the
Right.
lyrics for, and I'd written the music. Anyway, we demoed it, and on playback, we're sitting in the control room, and we're listening to the music, and Ian's handed Charlie Charles, the drummer, a lyric, and on it, part of it says, "You must have seen parties of blockheads like with shoes like dead pigs' noses." And
Yes.
Charlie looks down at his footwear and goes, "Ian, that's me." And Norman goes, "Yeah, we're the blockheads," and high fives all round.
Wow. Amazing.
And then that was the name. The lyric jumps off the page and becomes the name of the band. So that's how we got the
Amazing.
name. And so we went on. Ian and I carried on writing, and we wrote the album New Boots and Panties, and we went and then went and excuse me, then went and demoed it in a basement, a damp basement in Bermondsey, part of London,
Right.
with Charlie Charles and Norman Watt-Wright on Charlie on drums, Norman on bass. And then we went to Manfred Mann's studio and recorded the whole
Right.
thing again, but properly on 24 track tape, because it was only on TAC before that, I think.
Yeah.
We recorded the whole thing properly, which was great that we demoed it, because now we had an idea of the arrangements of the songs, so it flowed really well. Um, and Ian's management, Black Hill, were upstairs from Stiff Records, and Stiff Records were downstairs, and run by Dave Robinson, and they signed us on that record. That record came out on Stiff Records, and they wanted us to go out and tour. And we said, yeah, we'd do it, but we needed Charlie Charles and Norman Watroy. And they said, well, we'll come with you as long as we can bring the other members of our band. They've been playing in a band called Loving Awareness.
Right.
And which had a keyboard player called Mickey Gallagher and a guitar player called Johnny Turnbull. And so that, oh, sorry, I don't know what that is. My phone just went. So that became the Blockheads, and Ian then enlisted Davey Payne on sax. And as I say, that became the Blockheads for about 20 years. That was it.
Absolutely amazing. And of course, the saxophone is very, very prominent in a lot of the Blockhead sound as well, with all the solos and such like.
Yeah.
Now, you co-wrote some of the band's best-known songs with Ian Dury, including Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, Reasons to Be Cheerful, Part 3, and Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick, which featured at number 18 on the greatest ever British number ones in The Guardian. Who was responsible for the sound and the image of the Blockheads?
Oh, ooh. I mean, a huge amount, I would say, was Ian, obviously, Ian Dury. I mean, he was a very stylish, incredibly stylish individual. I mean, he'd come from art school. He had a very painterly background. He understood not only how to be an entertainer, but which he did brilliantly. But he had a lot of other reference points, or had a huge amounts of reference points. Let's put it like that.
Yes,
that came together for him as an entertainer. Yeah. The style, that was his own, really. He suggested the logo. He said, how about writing Blockheads but make it into a face? So he approached a graphic designer called Barney Bubbles, and he came. He said, okay, Ian, I've got an idea. Have a look at this. And that was the Blockheads logo that we use to this day. That's how it came about. Style-wise, everybody had their own style in a way. I mean, Dr. Martens were very prevalent. If you look down at our footwear, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Except Charlie Charles was probably still wearing shoes like dead pigs' noses.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was really just the style of the times, really. But as I say, Ian really had such a definitive look with his, cloth cap and, scarf and so forth, that I would say that it was he spearheaded that look. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, which worked very well for the whole band and the image. Now, Reasons to Be Cheerful is a fabulous single which scored as high as number 3 in the summer of 1979. Are there any more than 3 parts, or were there other parts that were okay to be broadcast?
It's a very good point, that. Do you know what? I've never actually asked it, why is it part 3? Sometimes you don't want to come across as being a complete idiot. So rather than ask an obvious question, I think it might have been because if you remember back in the day, those days, people like James Brown would put out an instrumental or a track, and you'd flip it open, it'd be part 2. So maybe I'll go one further. I'm going to make it this part 3.
A bit like George Formby there with When I'm Cleaning Windows. If you go to the B side, that he's talking about something even worse. It actually gets a bit more raunchy.
Does it? When I'm cleaning toilets or something.
Yeah, on the 78 there, he talks more about what's through the window he can see and all sorts.
Of course.
But I was quite surprised when I got that 78. I was going, this is going to be, it's going to be hilarious, and it was, So yeah, if anyone gets a copy of that, When I'm Cleaning Windows by
B-side,
George Formby, B-side's better than the A side.
I bet. I
But at
bet.
the time, they probably weren't able to play the B side. Probably was
I
banned.
remember, Phil, you made me think about a B-side, The Stars That Play with Laughing Sam's Dice. And I think
Right,
that was the B-side of Jimi Hendrix's Purple Rain. The Stars That
right.
Play with Laughing. And the guitar playing was ridiculously good. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the greatest song. Well, it didn't have such a catchy chorus as Purple Rain. But
Yeah.
if ever you want to, eke out a B-side, The Stars That Played with Laughing Sam's Dice. I mean, how I even remember that title, I don't know, but that was a brilliant B-side. As was Sing a Simple Song, which I think was the B-side of Thank You for Sly and the Family Stone. That was a great song. Yeah,
Yes, we'll have to hunt out that B side there. See, we've both
yeah.
got a B side to listen to and an A side.
You could have a great show, couldn't you? Just featuring B-sides.
That's right. That's right. Because sometimes the B side's way better than the A side.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, I had that
Now,
with what's her name? Oh God, not Q-tips. What were they called before that? A Toast, and I had a
oh,
B-side.
that's right, Toast. The street band, was it? Oh, and it was.
Street band. You've got it. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Paul Young.
Yeah.
That was Paul Young's band before he went solo. Well, anyway, Toast was the B side of the single I'd produced. No DJ was interested in the A side, and someone just, well, what's on the B side? Played Toast, and that became
Toast.
radio. Well, it was a radio hit anyway.
Yes, yes, and I've actually got an album on the shelf there yet to listen to, which is actually the street band, which has got Toast on it, and I'll be looking forward to hearing the other tracks because it's quite interesting that Toast wasn't actually it was actually a B side, not an A side. Amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't even written by them. I think it was written by their manager because they used to take so long tuning their guitars or, between songs, they had nothing going on. And he hurriedly wrote this song called Toast. I don't know. That's what I think is what happened.
And you've got Paul Young there scraping the toast and that and doing a little bit of commentary as he's
He was
doing it.
probably making a bit of toast between songs, and that's why it was taking so long.
That's right. He might have burnt a few in between takes, a few slices. Excellent, excellent. Now, Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick is an iconic song and debuted on the chart, which was a debut on the chart, which is the most successful chart-wise in the UK, scoring number one for 1 week in December 1978. How long did it take to write the lyrics and melody with its driving rhythm, Chaz?
Okay. Right.
Because that rhythm, ding, 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 it's the disco is in there, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll tell you exactly what happened. Mr. Ian Dury had rented a house in Kent, and in his living room, he had a drum kit set up, and he had a Fender Rhodes piano. And next to his drum kit, he had a little drum machine. So one day I turned up there just to write together. We were going to write.
Yeah.
Or jam or whatever. He often just started with us jamming together. And Ian gets on the drum kit and just starts playing a beat like doom, doom, bam, doom, 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 to fall to the floor. Yeah. I mean, because of Ian's disability, he was restricted with some of his, let's say, in sophisticated syncopation on the bass drum. He didn't have the muscle to be able to, do that. However, he liked to sit on the drum kit and go, and put down a great, heavy, simple, straight ahead rhythm. And not to say he couldn't play sophisticated rhythms, but on this particular occasion, he's going doom, da, doom, doom, da, boom, doom, ba. And he's got a drum machine that's got a kind of, I don't know, like a bossa nova. Just so
yes.
You remember those, like sort of Latin mambo, cha-cha, had all of that. Anyway, so he was keeping in time with that rather than just having a metronome going doo, 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 doo. That was far too boring for him. So he had this thing. Anyway, so I made my way into the living room and I sat down at the Fender Rhodes and I'm just going ding 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 ding. I don't know why. I just didn't know quite what to do. I'm just sort of like training with them, ding ding ding, and I'm playing along. And it didn't go a lot further than that. But that evening, we said goodnight to each other, and I went back to where I was living. And then the following morning, I woke up, and prior to recording or writing Hit Me With a Rhythm Stick, we had had the album New Boots and Panties that I just mentioned, and
Yeah.
that was already come out. It'd been very successful, and that was done and dusted. However, there was the opening track called "Wake Up and Make Love with Me," and I just liked that track, and I thought, and particularly what I liked somehow the piano solo I'd played on the end, and the piano solo went bam 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 bam
Yeah.
bam. Okay, so
Excellent.
thank you. I didn't know that you. Anyway, so I thought, why do I like that? Why do I like that? And I suddenly heard right at the beginning, it goes bap bam dun, dun, dun. I went, hang on a moment, bap bap, and for some reason, I that was just an improvised little bap. I don't know. I just put that in
Yeah.
spontaneously at that moment when I was recording "Wake Up and Make Love." Anyway, so I thought, oh, if I was to take that little and I put that at the beginning of the rhythmic motif, let's put it like that I'd been playing the day before with Ian, I'd get
Yeah.
ding 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 ding,
Yeah.
and I thought, ooh, this is good. And
Yeah.
so I called up Ian, and I said, you've got to hear something. What happened? And he said, yeah, come down. So I went down there. When I got down there, he said he ushered me towards the garage where there was an upright acoustic piano. I didn't even know it was there. And he says, and he brings a lyric to me, and gives me a lyric, very succinct. It was just 3 verses, 1 chorus, the most compact lyric he'd ever given me. And he said, I'm going back to the house. It's a bit cold in here, isn't it? I said, and I went, all right. And off he went. 25 minutes later, I had the song written. I just
Wow.
the verses and the choruses with this rhythm, at the heart of it. And, and then the following day, or 2 days later, we got the Blockheads down, and we rehearsed it, went through it. A few days later, we went to the workhouse in in the Old Kent Road, as I mentioned, Manfred Mann's studio.
Yeah.
And Laurie Latham was engineering, he'd done New Boots and Panties, fantastic engineer. He used to, amongst others, he produced Echo and the Bunnymen and Paul Young, a lot of great records. Anyway,
Yeah.
so there we were. We recorded the song. I think we did it about 7 times, but it was take 2 that we kept. That was the one that we hear on the radio, etc. And that's
Wow.
And I called up my mum from the studio, and I knew it in every bone of my body that we had a number 1 on our hands. And I said, Mum, this is going to be going to number 1. And my prophecy was correct. It did,
Yes, it certainly did. Now, where were you when you actually found out that you were number 1? Can you remember where you were, where you found out?
No, Phil, I don't. I don't.
Long time ago it was.
I remember when it was at number 1. I remember thinking to myself, "Don't get too big for your boots," because you might think you're famous, but you're not as famous as Jesus. Actually,
Yeah.
I know somebody else who quoted that in a slightly different way, but I think we know who we're talking about. But anyway, no, I thought, absolutely, whoa, this is great, this is fantastic, but don't get too carried away because there's only one way down from here, actually.
Yeah.
Enjoy it whilst it lasts. And I tell you what, it was fantastic because every band really needs a hit under their belt. It's just what it is when people go out, they like to hear something they've heard on the radio, and it's as simple as that, really, I think.
Yeah, it puts you on it definitely stamps the trademark on there of your band when you've got a number 1 hit there. Because then, I mean, for the single to be still as popular now as it was in 1978,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely amazing, isn't it? Because it's wherever you go, it's on the radio or it's at a disco, at a wedding or anything. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I think the further away you get from London, the more popular it gets. I mean, London is such a fast-moving place in terms of styles. But I have found this through the years. The further you go, particularly you get to the coastal areas, you get like much more of a synthesis between generations. So there is a huge divide. like I can't imagine, let's put it like this, many 25-year-olds wanting to go out with their dads of a Saturday night in Camden Town in London, for example. But you know what I mean? And therefore there's these cultural divides to an extent.
Yes.
I don't think you get that so much the further you go away. I see, like so yeah. And maybe therefore think styles don't change quite as quick when you get further from London.
Yeah.
I know Norman Watroy played with Wilco, our bass player I was just talking about. He played with Wilco Johnson for many years, and we did a gig back
Yes.
with them in Spain, the Blockheads and them. And I could tell the Spanish, they just love rock. They love blues and rock. Like
Yeah.
the more raw it is, the more they like it. Whereas in a way,
Yeah.
funk and soul and so forth, it might be a tad sophisticated for them. And I'm not sure if their bodies move quite in that way.
Yeah.
If they want dance music, they've got flamenco. But
Well, that's right.
I don't
That's
think we got
right.
there. But actually, they got into their club culture as well, didn't they? Massively. But that was, a different kind of branch of it all. But yeah, so as I say, I think, thank God that people aren't so trend driven that they don't listen to, to music that was made with a lot of spirit, actually, back, in
Yes.
the late 70s. I think it was a great time for music. It was, we took chances. I think I don't think record companies stamped so hard on you back then,
Yeah.
insisting you follow whatever had just been popular in the charts,
Yeah.
so maybe that's, that was a great, we were very fortunate. Sorry, I don't know how I got here, Phil, but we were just very fortunate to be, in the timeline to exist when we did, and we still play to this day. We're still playing all over the country. Obviously, there's been a number of personnel changes.
Yes.
Touch wood, I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, going back in time there, what was it like being on Top of the Pops? And can you remember who you were on with?
Yeah, actually, what was their name? The Sugar Hill Gang, I think,
Right.
were on.
Rapper's Delight.
Because Rapper's Delight, because I seem to remember the bass player in that band. Oh God, and I can't remember who it was now. Looking at Norman, going, admiring his bass line on Reasons to Be. That's not, no, sorry, on Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which has become an iconic bass line over the years.
Yes.
But that is about as far as it goes. I can't really remember who else was playing, actually. You know what? It was such a heady experience, Phil.
Yes.
My feet barely touched the ground. It's an unreal experience having a number one to an extent, actually, because it's
Yes.
written on one level, but and it's phenomenal for the ego. But as I just said, you've got to keep that in check.
Yeah.
So it's slightly confusing because of those polarities.
Yes.
Yeah, and so the whole period was a little bit a bit vague in my mind.
A bit vague, yeah. Now, what was it? What was it like? Life on the road with Ian Dury and the band.
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it? Well, it was like.
Was any mischief
To be
from
honest, it was
Ian?
very mischief. Did you mention the word mischief?
Yeah, mischief from Ian. He had a little bit of a glint in his eye. I think that he was a bit of a
He
cheeky
certainly
sort.
did. He was a cheeky sort. He was a cheeky sort. He liked to sit up front in if he were in a small van, and if he were on a coach, he would be up the back. He was like a straight back chair. He couldn't lean back because of
Yeah.
like to have
Yes.
some support. It was light-hearted, to be honest. And this is an important thing I like to remember about Ian. He loved a laugh. He was very deep, very wise, but loved a laugh. He liked having a laugh, and
Yeah.
so that generally was the level of energy in the van as we're hurtling around the country. That would be it, really. Was it serious? I think he took his craft seriously,
Yeah.
but generally, as the atmosphere in the band would be very light-hearted. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It did come
A lot
across
of
on.
jokes, lot of jokes. bit of slandering. You can imagine
Yes.
it wasn't always that
Yes.
easy. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was. When you're in close quarters with the same people for a long time, it's actually an amazing education because you learn about democracy actually
Yeah.
at a very young age. And I think that, musicians have to learn to do that. And maybe in some respects that helps in the maturing. I mean, on the other hand, often musicians, if you live in a bubble, you
Yeah.
can miss out on a lot of other experiences in life. But I do, on the subject of democracy, I think we're quite evolved on that level because you can't just be selfish or too egocentric because you'll get pulled down by the others.
That's right. That's right. Yes, yes. Especially in this day and age as well, with social media and things.
Yeah.
Now, I Want to Be Straight followed scoring number 22 in the summer of 1980, and Superman's Big Sister climbed to number 51 in the UK chart. Now, did you find the musical landscape was changing, hence a lower chart position, or was it to do with the promotion?
Well, Phil, what happened was I took leave around about that time. I'm not saying that's why the record wasn't successful, but Ian was pretty. Let's add to what I just said about him. It was intense. In a way, in the nicest possible way, was a bit of a gang boss. I mean, he liked having his team around him. He liked to be team-handed. It made him feel a lot more secure,
Yeah.
stronger. And at times, I felt that I needed a bit more space. So I sort of took leave. I was producing bands in other things. Alberto Los Trios Paranoias. I produced them,
Wow.
produced some other, you might have heard,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
other things, but I wasn't around when they produced Laughter. I'm not playing on I Want to Be Straight. Wilco's playing on that. I had
Right.
nothing to do with those records. I heard via the band it was a very tricky album to make. It was nothing but it wasn't Laughter at all. Although the album was
Right.
Laughter, we still play I Want to Be Straight when we go out and play live. We play every gig, and the audience seemed to love it.
Yeah.
But no, was it a change of direction? To be honest, I don't really know the answer to that. Yeah, of course things are changing in a way, but I don't know if that was the reason the record wasn't well accepted. The album, um, I don't know. Is the answer?
Yeah, because sometimes it's to do with, because maybe was it to do with the new romantics coming on the scene and things like that, maybe?
Do you know what I think? I'll tell you what I think. This is just an intuition I have about it. I don't think Ian was very happy with it. And I think as a result, he didn't promote it. I don't think
No.
his heart was in it. I think it was, as I say, and I mean, I was watching an interview with him that was made back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And I think he acknowledged that once he'd made New Boots and Panties, he'd made, in his estimation, one really good record. He put
Yeah.
so much into that, and I think, in his estimation, also we made one other album, another good album, which was quite a few years after that. I don't even remember what it was. It was Mr. Love Pants, which
Right.
not as many people know about, but it had some great material on it. But it, just to well, Do It Yourself came out after New Boots and Panties. That was a tough record to make as well,
Yeah.
because we didn't have the material. New Boots and Panties, our very first album, in a way, had all the years before. That was his first. Well, he'd made albums with the Kilburns and the Kilburn and the High Roads, but
Yeah.
that record, New Boots and Panties, he put his heart and soul into it, and he was a very the bar was very high with Ian, and if he'd made, I think once he'd made that record, he sort of took his foot off the pedal a little bit, really.
Yes.
You know, it's very hard to come up with genius lyrics the whole time, and obviously you don't repeat yourself musically.
Yeah.
So, obviously things were changing. Yes, styles were changing. I don't think that ever really affected us in what
No.
we wanted to do. But yes, maybe you're right. That's what was happening around us. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of changes in the music industry, which is happening all the time, really, isn't it? Even to this day and age.
Yeah.
Now, the Blockheads disbanded in early 1982 after Ian Dury secured a new recording deal with Polydor Records. Do you think it was the right time for the Blockheads to call it a day after working so hard since 1977?
I don't think we called it a day. I don't seem to remember we called it a day. Um, I mean, I went with Ian to the Bahamas and we recorded Lord Upminster, and that
Yeah,
the fruit that was from that came from that was Spasticus autisticus, the song
right.
Spasticus autisticus. We recorded that with Sly and Robbie, Jamaican rhythm section.
Yes. Yeah.
Ian was at that point was with Polydor, and Chris Blackwell, who actually is head of Ireland, but anyway, this album came out on Polydor. He invited Ian out to the Bahamas to the Compass Point Studios to make this album with Sly and Robbie, and Ian brought me as his sidekick, like as a guitar player, and
Right.
that we just had. That's all he had was the title Spasticus Autisticus. We didn't
Right.
have any other songs, and we had to make an album in 2 weeks. So
Wow.
that was it. Yeah, Lord Upminster, the album. We came back and we started doing gigs with the Blockheads, and I remember us sort of rehearsing the song Spasticus Autisticus with the Blockheads, and
Yeah.
it sounded fantastic. Um, so really, that was what happened. The band didn't really, I can't remember all the shenanigans with the record contracts and so forth, but
Yeah.
that was what happened. That was why the Blockheads aren't playing on that particular album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the summer of 1994, let's fast forward. The summer of 1994 was when, after relocating to California, you returned to the UK, Chaz, where you were invited to perform for the Madstock Festival in Finsbury Park. This was followed by sporadic gigs in Europe, Ireland, and the UK, and even Japan through late 1994 and 1995. How was the band received, and what was it like performing to new audiences, which will no doubt have had children of parents who grew up with the music of Ian Dury and the Blockheads?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember it actually being that different from what we'd been doing before that. Um, you know, Madness, who had studied Ian's craft, I would say, as did the Sex Pistols. I mean, they were getting great fame. Well, I mean, the
Yeah,
Madness particularly. Um, we were just part of that whole music scene, I suppose. Really. Yeah, I mean, the people originally came along, they were having kids, presumably our original fans, they were having children. They were probably introducing their kids to that music.
yeah,
So to be honest, nothing really changed. It was just Ian was getting older, we were getting older.
yeah.
Not a lot of change was happening, to be honest. That's all that was happening. Our style was getting more recognizable. Um, our fan base was expanding, I suppose. That was it.
Yeah. And when you were back together, was it like fitting into an old pair of slippers? Was it like you've never been away? You're on stage. It's
Yeah,
like we're
eclectic. I
back
would
to where
say
we were.
so. I would say so. It's like with old friends. You kind of it's like family, really. And we'd spent a lot of time together. We'd become very accepting of each other, really. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you pick up from where you left off, don't you? Quite easily, especially with old friends as well. It's like you mightn't see them for a couple of months or even a year, and then you meet up, and it's like they've never been away.
That's right. Yeah, but just going back a little bit, because you went on to the 90s there. What happened was in 1986, I I went and moved to America. I moved to Los Angeles, and
Right.
my sister was had been asked to direct a movie called Dead on Arrival,
Yeah.
D.O.A. And she asked me to do the film score. She asked me to write the music for it. So I moved out there. This is 1986, and for a few months I did exactly that. And so I was very fortunate because I got freelance orchestral musicians to play on this score, a 19-piece string section, oboes, cellos, violins, basses, violins, absolutely fantastic musicians. And I composed the music for D.O.A, Dead on Arrival. This was an important thing I'm bringing up here because that's the reason I'm actually talking to you today. Is because
That's right. We're going to be picking up from that soon.
I'm trying to throw some light on this particular venture that took place.
Yes.
So after the film came out with Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan starring in it, the music was briefly available on Varese Sarabande. That was a CD soundtrack label. They ceased trading in the early 90s, so you couldn't get the soundtrack anywhere. Well, fast forward to 2024, and my wife, Elaine, said she loved the music from this film. She'd in fact seen the film in Norwich back in the 80s before we even knew each other, and she said she loved the music, and how sad you couldn't hear it anywhere. So we went about changing that, and we went back to the original music. We found it, and we remastered it, re-edited it, and made it into an album length. But plus, I wrote a new piano sonata, amalgamating all the different themes that were in the original music score, and I added that. So there's 7 pieces of music, and that's the last piece is a piano sonata, which is almost like me summarizing this original score, which is on the record. This is the original score plus one, so to speak.
Yes.
And so that's what we've done. We've been trying to just, because a lot of people, and look how this whole interview has been, built around Ian Dury and the Blockheads. But what I'm trying to say to you here, what I want to say is that I have a life outside of that. I've scored about 12 or 14 movies, and and I'm as equally love instrumental music and the more classical and jazz oriented musics as I am into kind of rock and roll, so to speak. And it just feels great to be able to promote that and throw a spotlight on that as well, really. And it's all available, and it's available. It's up online. It's out there. This album is out there. D.O.A. Reimagined is the album title.
It is. Now, Chaz, you've penned numerous songs, including I Know Corrida, that became a big hit for the late Quincy Jones, and Glad to Know You from his second soul album, Chazanova, which was a massive dance hit in the USA, staying at number 1 in the Billboard Hot 100 chart for some 6 weeks. What was it like writing for such iconic singers?
Fantastic. I mean, I didn't actually write it for him specifically. I mean, I'd recorded I Know Corrida on the back of Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick. I got, and the success of that band, I got my own record deal with A&M, and that was in 1980. And I made 4 albums for them. Well, on that label, I should say. And they signed me on 2 songs, I Know Corrida and another song called Am I Honest With Myself, Really? And it's a long title. And it's also a long song. It was 14 and a half minutes.
Wow. Was there a radio edit as well?
No, not really. There should be. Pete Townsend, who was a mate of Ian's, said, he said, your mate Chaz, he said he's put a song which is 14 and a half minutes long on side 2 of his first album. And he went, I know, it's weird, isn't it?
Well, it's a bit like Meatloaf, isn't it? I'd do anything for love, but I won't do that. I'm sure that goes on. I think you've probably got the record. You've,
Oh, really?
or it's his 17 minutes. I don't know.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I thought I held the world. No, I don't.
You might have the
don't
world
know.
record. His might be only 12 minutes.
Well, funny enough, that's exactly what happened with Quincy Jones, because my one on my I Know Creed, it was track one on my first album for
Yeah.
A&M, spelled Chas Jankel. I've changed it to Chaz. You know, not exactly going to set the world alight, but just to let
Yeah,
people,
but it's cool.
I am
Yeah.
the same guy. I am
Yeah.
that guy. And um, so yeah, and my original was 8.5 minutes long, and I won't go into the whole business of how he got to hear it because I've said that
Yeah.
so many times. But
Yes.
he did get to hear it, and he was working with Rod Temperton. Rod says,
Wow.
you know, and they did a beautiful version, obviously, and it's like, well, you know, single length, and he had Herbie Hancock on it.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, playing keys. Louis Johnson from the Johnson Brothers, he's playing bass, and a host of great musicians. And as we know, whatever Quincy, you know, touched, it turned to gold. I mean, like he's just a
Yeah.
brilliant artist and producer, and he worked with this fantastic recording engineer called Bruce Swedian, who, you know, really helped to put the sound together.
Yes.
And I was very, very fortunate. So he had a hit everywhere other than Italy and Argentina, where I had a hit with my
Right.
an edited version, I must add, of my,
All right.
my 8.5 minute opus. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So, out of all of the people that you've written for, was Quincy's the one that is the one that's at the top of your tree?
Well, as I say, I didn't write it for him. I wrote my own version, and he happened to pick up on it. If we're talking about covers, I would say when
Yeah.
what was it called? Brand new boots and panties. So there was
Yeah.
an album called Brand New Boots and Panties where artists came down and chose a song from the album that they wanted to record, and it was the original
Right.
album. And Paul McCartney came in and sang "Partial to Your Abracadabra," which is
Wow.
track three on New Boots and Panties, the original New Boots and Panties. We had all these great people come in. Sinead O'Connor came in. Madness
Wow.
did something. Shane McGowan did something. Oh,
Wow.
you know, I mean, what
Amazing.
that was. And the day
Yeah.
I thought, well, you know, this is pretty damn good. He was down in the studio playing his guitar, looking up at me. And at one point, he did this funky little movement. And I think he winked at me, and I think I winked back. That was a great moment. That was, you know, that was really nice, you know. So, yeah, that was a fantastic. I think that was great just to hear him. He sang it so high. And I said to him,
Right.
I said, how do you sing like that? And he said, well, John once said to me, he said, look, if you don't know how to sing it, just think about Little Richard. And I went, oh, right, that's how you do it. Okay. I don't know if I got the accent quite right, but
Yeah, I liked it. Yes.
no,
But yeah, we'll have to track that one down.
Sorry.
We'll have to track that album down.
Yeah. And
Be excellent.
yeah, it's not. It never got much promotion. I think there were so many artists on it, and only one song per artist. I don't think the record labels were any of them were particularly interested in promoting it. But that was a great moment. Oh, beyond that, you know, there are other artists, but I can't think of the title of the songs. I mean, so yeah, I did. I actually, funny enough, PP Arnold. I've just she's just put out a retrospective on Demon Records.
Right.
And, there's for the first time ever, there's some songs we wrote back in the 90s on there, and there's a fantastic track we wrote called "Take Me to the Top." And Phil, if you could find that and play that on your show, I would be so happy. It's, you know, "Take Me to the Top." It was one of those songs I always thought, why hasn't this been released? And what is it? It must be nearly 30 years since I wrote it.
Wow.
And yeah, that was great. There's 4 songs on that record. It's a 3 CD box set.
Right.
On Demon. So that's great. Working with her, you know, PP Arnold, who came over here originally because she was singing with Ike and Tina Turner. Yeah.
Wow. Ah, amazing.
Mick Jagger, her mate, said, "Listen, mate, stay here. Don't go back. Stay here." I think
Yeah.
that's, what she says about her history here. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. But yes, I will. So I will hunt for that track definitely and give
Yeah,
it
it's one of my favorites.
some
That's one of
airplay.
my favorites. Yeah.
I certainly will. Now, you've written a number of film scores, including An Unusual Job for a Woman, War Party, Killing Dad, K2, Rachel Papers, and, as we mentioned earlier, D.O.A, Dead on Arrival, which your sister Annabelle co-directed.
Yes.
Which film have you had most enjoyment working on?
Well, the first film that comes to mind is one you didn't actually mention there. It was a film called Cat from Hell, and it was
Right.
actually it was a film made from Tales from the Dark Side. Tales from the Dark Side, which was a TV series in America, but they made a film of it, and
Right.
this film was three stories, and the middle story was it Edgar Allan Poe wrote the story originally, I think it was, and anyway, it was
Right.
adapted to the screenplay. It was called Cat from Hell, and I remember one day I was in Los Angeles and I went to a diner on Ventura Boulevard, and I met the
Right.
and I met the director for a bit of lunch, and a really nice guy, and he says, "Okay, Chaz," he says, which film would you like to do the music for?" And I said, "Could I
Right.
do all three?" And he went, "No, no, you can't do all three. You can do one." And I went, "Oh, okay." So he said, "Which one would you like to do?" I said, "Well, I'd like to do Cat from Hell." And he said to me, he said, "Well, so how do you hear the music?" And I went, "I just see the color blue." And he went, "Brilliant," and shook my hand. He said, "You got the job."
Wow.
Had lunch, and and off I went, and that was it. So and I remember doing that, just trying to imagine this kind of hazy bluish tint that sat
Yeah.
behind, kind of trying to create this a kind of mysterious yet slightly dark atmosphere
Yeah.
for this film called Cat from Hell. And I tell you what, if you ever get to see it, it is the best piece of schlock horror. Not a lot of money spent on it, but the
Yeah.
effects absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Amazing.
So I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed also another film I did called War Party, which was a film made by Frank Rodham. He directed Quadrophenia,
Right.
and it was a great story set in America. I enjoyed doing the score for that. I obviously enjoyed doing Dead on Arrival. D.O.A. That was a great score opportunity. More recently, obviously, I did the music for Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, the movie.
Yes, indeed, and yes, you got a you were nominated. You got a BAFTA for that,
I was
didn't you? Yes,
nominated. I was nominated.
congratulations. Yes,
Yeah, that was great. I that was nice. It was great to do that. So that's it. I've probably forgotten quite a few of the movies I've worked on, but I always think there's probably one round the corner. But I also know that you can't really concentrate on too many things in life. I mean, I think the most successful film composers just do that all the time.
yes,
You can't really switch courses. I've been a bit of been a bit of a butterfly in my life. I've
yeah.
somehow got away with it. Touch wood again. Hey, just check my hair, right?
Touch wood.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, yeah. So I would say I've kind of got away with it, but that's just because I have a broad interest in music.
Yes.
And I've been very fortunate also because my sister asked me to do a film with her way back, Dead on Arrival. And in fact, she's just directed a new movie called Desperate Journey, which is they're looking for a distribution deal at the moment.
Right.
And a brilliant film set in the Second World War. And I've got a song in that.
Right.
But also, I've done an instrumental version of that, which is going to come out on a forthcoming album of mine that I've made with a cellist called Frank Schaefer. And the album, and the album's called Notes of Bergamot. And in a way, it follows from what I was saying to you a little earlier about how I love instrumental music as much as and music which is a bit more impressionistic
Yes.
than the rock and roll thing that most people associate me with. But this album, Notes of Bergamot, is mainly just piano and cello. But I'm very happy with it because it's very meditative. It's a sort of, I think as you get older, because you probably don't go to so many clubs, and one doesn't, and you get a little bit
Yeah.
heavier, you're not apt to sort of boogie around the living room quite as much.
No, yes. That's right. I know what you mean.
You know what I mean, Phil?
Yeah, I do. I
Well,
do, Chaz.
so as a result, I quite like music that makes me feel quite, calm. I like music,
Yes.
and I think that's reflected in the music I listen to a bit more now. Not to say I don't like all the great records that I liked in my youth, but my wife and myself, we like to listen to classic calm and things like that. We
Yes.
don't always want to be hit round the head with screaming guitars.
That's right.
I
That's
think my
right.
ears have been sort of battered from years of standing not only close to guitars but cymbals. They're the worst offenders. Ouch! They can get
They can as well, yeah. I think mine's off wearing headphones too loud on the
Is it?
radio and things. So apologies if I'm shouting. Now, going back to your music there and your composing of film soundtracks, how do you decide on the instrumentation when you're actually composing the soundtrack? How do you lay things down? Is it similar to when you're actually composing, like maybe a song? Is it same kind of structure? What's the differences between
the
them?
structure's different because obviously the narrative film takes a lot longer. A song. I would say the interesting comparison is this: when you're writing a song, the lyric is the equivalent of the narrative in a film.
Right.
But in a song, like the structure is so different because generally it's intro, two verses, pre-chorus, chorus. Sometimes you don't have a pre-chorus, but there's very much a structure. If you were to break it down, most songs have three choruses, blah blah blah. With
Yes.
a movie, obviously you need a theme. Probably have a theme, but there's a lot more space. And I think the principle is the same in as much as you try to create the right or the appropriate instrumentation, or no, atmos is the word I'd use,
Yeah.
for that scene. You can play against it. I think in like Clockwork Orange, there was quite a sort of upbeat classical piece. I can't remember what it was, but you had this horrendous scene going on, very horrific, violent scene, and it had a counterbalance music. I can't remember what the piece was. It was
Right.
and it makes it quite sickening, almost like makes it even worse because
Yes.
your brain doesn't know how to deal with it all. However, I don't tend to do that. I tend to try and empathize with what the narrative is saying
Yes.
in the movie, and that's how I'd approach it. A lot of the time, you'd probably feature around one instrument. That would be it might be a guitar or piano or maybe another instrument, and you build it around that. Maybe also you don't even know where it's starting. I tell you one thing I do know, I've noticed is less is more with a film.
Right.
Like you don't have to put the melody in so much because the melody in a way is not only is it in the same register as the dialogue often, but
Yeah.
you don't want to get in the way of the dialogue. What I mean by register is if it's too much in that register, it's going to blot out the dialogue. And the guy who's mixing the film at the end of the day, and he's got the dialogue and he's got the music, he's
Yeah.
always going to favour the dialogue because
Yeah.
the money men, that's what they want. They want to be able to hear the dialogue. They don't want to.
Yes.
The music is an accompaniment. It's a kind of to set the scene. But
Yes.
I do like in America, they're not afraid to put the score up, the music, but they know how to mix it properly so you can hear. So you get the emotional effect of a nice, rich, loud score, but it doesn't get in the way of a dialogue. I hate
No.
to say it, but sometimes I don't hear that going on in some areas. Sometimes, I mean, there's a film recently, Nosferatu, where I don't think it was mixed as quite as well as it could have been. The music
Right.
seemed quiet, and therefore I think they missed a trick on that one because when the music's up at the right moment, it can be really moving. It moves
Yeah.
you. you know. But at the same time, having said that, I don't like a movie where there's music, wall to wall. I,
Yeah.
I think yes, bring it in where it needs it, but then let it go, because that's more true to life. Actually, it's much more true to life. Music isn't. We don't all walk around with a soundtrack going 24/7.
No, 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 no.
I would say that's true, and I know that filmmaking is a craft, but at the same time, I think if the acting's strong and if the story's strong, you don't need to prop it up. Yeah.
No, no, no. And I've noticed with your soundtracks as well that you aren't relying on putting that same kind of melody in all of the time. It's not like the Ipcris file, which that's that song that's playing all the way through the film. As far as I remember, I've got it on DVD, I've got it on Blu-ray, and when I watch it, I think that bit of music distracts you from
Yeah.
the acting, which is not what it's all about, is it? Really,
Well, I hear what you're saying. That's it. I think you're
it's
absolutely
got
right.
the flutes, do, and all that, and all of that with the soundtrack of the Ipcris file. It's a bit over the top, I think.
Exactly. Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. So I'm going to I've got a frog in my throat here.
I'm the same.
I think we're all right now. I think we're all right.
We're all right. Cool, cool. But yes, yeah. We're going to talk about the fabulous D.O.A. Dead on Arrival, which is what we're here to talk about, really. Because as soon as I heard that the soundtrack was being released, I just couldn't believe it. After the 25 years that it was, it had been on CD and then it kind of disappeared, kind of thing. And it's coming out on vinyl as well, I believe. Is that right?
Not at the moment, Phil.
Not
it's
at the moment. All right.
I
Maybe
don't know
little
about
Dicky
vinyl
Birds
release.
put something in my ear and maybe
Well-
they've jumped the gun a bit.
I'd love it to go on vinyl. I mean, if there was a sufficient interest in it, I wouldn't say no to that. I'd love it to be on vinyl, but right at this moment, no.
Not at the moment, because I think it would sound wonderful on vinyl as well. Now, I did actually manage to watch the film D.O.A., and I must say, your music soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal and really helps drive the film along.
Thank you.
How long did it take from getting the brief to compose the soundtrack and then for it to be recorded for screen?
Wow. To write the music took me probably about 6 weeks. To record it, well, then it had to be scored, transcribed. That took about a week. Then to record it, I think, that took about, well, it was one big day with a string section, the orchestra in a studio in Los Angeles, Ocean Way Studios, big studio, brilliant studio on Sunset Boulevard where Sinatra had recorded and loads of artists recorded. So, how long would I say? So from beginning to end, probably from me starting to write it to recording, probably about 3 months. Yeah.
That's amazing, that, because it sounds like it would have took a hell of a lot longer than that, because it's just got such a lot of things going on with it, And I love how it's the rhythm that drives it as well,
Oh, wow. There's my favorite moment. One of my favorite moments is when, excuse me, when Dennis Quaid is told he's got 24 hours to live. He's just realised that's it.
Yeah.
And as it dawns on him, he walks out of the hospital, and I had this guitar that had a lot of sustain, and I just held this note, and there's a kind of lot of sustain, and then underneath it, I bring in these organ chords, and then that bleeds, well, the dovetails into the.
Yes.
Oh, actually, no. Was it the or was it? The Water Boys. Sorry, it was the Water Boys.
The Water Boys.
Water Boys. My fault. And that whole sequence is really dear to me. I thought that really worked. The dynamics in that. Sometimes you get these areas where it just comes together beautifully in film. I remember one time though, after we'd there was a a preview of the film D.O.A. before it was released in the suburbs of LA, and
Right.
so everybody who was involved in the film went out there. My sister, the director, I went out there. Well, Annabelle's the co-director on it, and her partner at the time, Rocky Morton, he was also there. And everybody who worked in the movie were all huddled at the back of after the film. We all sort of gathered at the back of the cinema, and the head of Touchstone Films, Jeff Katzenberg, he was running Touchstone Films, which was releasing the film. That was a division of Disney.
Yes. Yeah.
Division of Disney, Touchstone. He turns, because in the score, in the film score, there is some electric guitars you've probably heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
He turns to his mate, or his assistant. He says, Jack. He says, what's that? And Jack had to explain it with an electric guitar. I don't think he quite, caught up with what was happening in musical trends, But he didn't like it. He didn't like it. Well, I don't like it, this stuff, But hey, thanks a lot. You could have come to an earlier, you could have told me ahead of time on this one. But he hadn't. He'd waited for this preview. Everybody else had been working on the movie for months.
Yeah.
And now he says, I don't, he wasn't crazy on guitar. Well, maybe he was right, because in retrospect, maybe I should have stuck to a more just the orchestral side. But at that moment, I was, being a little bit, what's the word? I was quite free with it. Let's put it like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Unrestrained.
Yeah.
That's what happened. I mixed it up now and again. I put some guitar in it, and but the fact you love the score makes me feel like I did the right thing. It was okay.
Yeah, it really is really good. Now, the thing is that I haven't been able to find it on DVD anywhere, not even on videotape. So I managed to find it on a streaming platform, YouTube, as it were.
Wow.
But it's actually in a disguise. It's in Japanese writing. It says it's got subtitles, but there's no subtitles on it. But that's how I managed to watch it. So when I spoke to the promotions team, the gentleman that I spoke to, he said, wow. So I sent him the link. So hopefully he's watched it as well, because it's absolutely amazing. Because it's great to, when I'm going to be speaking to, a composer or a writer of a song or such, like, it's good to get a bit of background. And actually, when it was the film was mentioned, I thought, I've got to have a look at this film. And I was actually totally drawn into it, and then when I'm going, well, this is Chaz Jankel here, that's his music there, it's just absolutely amazing, and everything fits so wonderfully, with the acting as well, and it just seems I would actually call it, if it was released on DVD or Blu-ray now, whatever, I would call it a cult classic.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's a shame it's not available. It really is a shame. Hopefully it will be at some point. There's been such, you know what it's like. There's such emphasis now on the new films and Netflix and all of that. I'd like to think there's a room for it, that film. I think there is. You see, originally it was a film noir. That was that film that we're talking about now, D.O.A, was a remake of an original film noir. And talking about themes, as we were,
Yes.
Before I scored the music for D.O.A, Annabelle had, my sister had introduced me to a chap called Michael Lynn, and he was going to be the music editor on the film, and he took me to a film lot. I can't remember if it was 20th Century Fox, something like that. He said, Chaz, I want to show you the film. And he showed me, we went to this little theatre, it was just the two of us, and he showed me the film Laura. And that's talk about a cult classic. That is a film noir classic, Laura.
Wow.
And it's that beautiful theme. Da 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 da, do 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 do. I mean, it's so fun. And that theme comes in the film quite a lot. And I think his point to me was, don't be afraid to write a theme. So I think that, yes, I agree you can overdo it, but if you put it into different contexts, like, for example, James Bond,
Yes.
You hear it in so many different guises, so many different perspectives, that it never gets boring. And it gives that identity to that film. So I think that that's another aspect of writing film music is to give it an identity, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, but we definitely need to get that out on DVD or Blu-ray. That
Yeah. Okay. Agree.
D.O.A.
I
Now,
agree.
D.O.A. was released in 1988, and the score was briefly available, as you mentioned earlier, on Verity's Saraband on CD. But for the last 25 years, one couldn't find it anywhere. And as you mentioned, your wife Elaine, who loved the original score, suggested you reimagining, mastering, and re-releasing the score, D.O.A. Dead on Arrival. Reimagined, it is now available through Kudos Records and can be found online and through your website, chazjankel.com. Now, there are 7 pieces on the album: Dead on Arrival Suite. Did I say Dead there? Dead on Arrival Suite
Yes.
radio edit, which is the original orchestral score presented as a suite. And Dead on Arrival Piano Sonata is a brand new interpretation of the theme. The sound is totally stripped back. How difficult, Chaz, was it to reimagine the Dead on Arrival suite?
It wasn't difficult. In fact, it was great to have, all those years to sort of listen to think about it, and to reappraise it really. And Elaine and myself tried just to imagine listening to as a listening experience as opposed to as a film soundtrack. That's the difference. No longer was we wanted to listen to it as if it was an album,
Yeah.
which it is. That's what it is, and it's self-standing. It stands on its own. That's what we did. So I'd say it was great. It was easy. Not it was a pleasure to kind of think about it in a fresh way. Maybe it's a bit like remixing a song. That would be the equivalent. You get the master tape of a song.
Yeah.
And you might think, oh, actually, there's a sound in there that I never brought to the front.
Yes.
I'll do that. I'll bring that up. Sometimes you see these programs where you see artists going back to the mixing board and they'll bring up the different channels.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You think, oh, I've never heard that before. But you have to make choices when you first mix something, and I think to reappraise it is a great thing to do.
Yes.
I really do think. I mean, I've got piano pieces I'm writing that that haven't come to the surface yet, but I've been toying with them for years and years and years. And as time goes by, they evolve. And I think time is the greatest helper in for an artist. Really, it allows you to get a perspective on your work. Really.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think it's a mistake to rush things out. Often Ian Dury used to say to me, what a shame we can't play something live before we release it. And that's often the case. Bands haven't had that opportunity, because what happens is when you play live is over years a track will expand, it stretches, and you'll get all interesting details happening, and not only that, you'll get more confidence in the arrangement, which you don't have if you go and record it right after you've written the song and you go into a studio. Yes, there'll be a freshness, but it doesn't have the beauty of time on its side. It's like a very fresh print. I mean, Rhythm Stick, there's an example. We play it every gig we play it. I've played with the Blockheads ever since we wrote it. I think I've played that song at every gig, pretty much. And has that changed? Well, the middle of it has really expanded. Now there's a bass solo in the middle of it. There's a drum solo. But that's it. But Reasons to Be Cheerful, that has kind of that's expanded. That's got longer. There's a song called In Betweeners, which was on our second album, Do It Yourself. It was the first track on the second album I put out with Ian Dury.
Yes.
That really expanded on the outro. I mean, my piano solo that's on the record, I've expanded upon that And so that's it. That's what I'm saying, Phil. Really, is like with time, and you get to draw out and really all those hidden elements which
Yes.
you bring to the surface. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you're reliving things again. It's like you're looking at it, like you say, in a new perspective. And as time has changed, you maybe your musical taste can change a little bit as well. So you might go, actually, that might sound a bit better, that tambourine or that drum section. Get that a bit higher, get a bit
Well,
more bass in or whatever.
you're absolutely right, Phil. And I would say, in addition to that, you're evolving more. You know
Yeah,
more. You know more. You understand more about structure. You understand more about dynamics as a musician. You have a bigger palette. You have more understanding, and you can bring that to play. You can bring that into the equation. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Excellent. Well, we're going to look forward to D.O.A. Being a big success as well. Do you have any future projects or releases you can tell us about?
Well, I mentioned the one with Frank Schaefer on the cello. That's something I'm going to be bringing out. I have a YouTube channel where I put up a lot of more like singles and things like that.
Yeah,
I've got a little 3-tracker that's going to come out soon, a 3-tracker, I should say,
excellent.
with a chap called Finn Peters. Now, he's a brilliant jazz saxophonist. He has his own group. Anybody's interested, look up Finn Peters, really great musician. And we've just done 3 tracks. On it, he's playing sax and flute. He's a very, very good jazz flautist. And so that's going to be coming out soon. I've got a track on my computer at the moment. It's just called Boogie 25. I don't know what it's called Boogie. It's a kind of, I love very rhythmic music, and I think there was a channel I've been listening to a little while back called Afro Venezuela, and there's some great sort of earthy rhythms on that. And sometimes, I'm reminded that of just rhythm for its own sake is a wonderful thing, and
Yeah,
sometimes I don't want song form to complicate it. I mean, for example, if you've ever seen a carnival or Mardi Gras, you've just got people walking down the street dancing to a rhythm.
oh, yes.
They're not thinking about a 3-minute 30 single. I know
No,
that.
no. It's all the rhythm, and it's
It's
so
the rhythm.
it
It's
is.
the rhythm, and I think that's what I'm reminded about when you hear African music, or you hear just music often, that just let it flow. Just let it flow. In fact, I put an album out called Flow, which I'd love people to have a listen to. I brought it out about 18 months ago, and that's funny enough. We got into that subject because I read a phenomenal book called Flow. It was called Flow. It's by a Hungarian psychologist, really, and he was saying
Right.
people are at their happiest. He'd done a lot of interviews when they're just in the flow, when they're in the middle of just working, when they're doing their thing, a bit like
Yeah.
you at the moment.
Yes, do me thing in the
You're in
flow.
the flow. You're in the flow.
Yes.
And that's what I try to remember about everything. And if you just remember that, you can't go wrong, because just like water is happy flowing along, I think we're at our happiest when we're just flowing along, not putting up these blocks in all these kind of barriers in the way of us creating, because that's what the universe is doing the whole time. It's creating all the time, or dissolving all the time. So there's a beginning, middle, and end to everything, maybe, but then it's cyclical. And
Yes.
and when I think like that, I can relax, because there's no benchmark, there's no deadline.
No, that's
There
true.
can be from time to time, but in the respect of creativity, it's ongoing.
Yeah. Now, with regards to the projects that you've got coming up, are you going to be, pushing towards releasing anything on vinyl at all in the future?
I would like, actually, it's very interesting you should mention that, because the company Kudos, who distribute my work, Kudos Records, we're talking actually about putting out some vinyl. I was talking to them about last week about that, and I think it's going to be work I did more back in my solo work that I did back
Yes.
in the 80s. I think we're talking about putting an album together. So yes, and you've reminded me to have a word with them to see how the project's going ahead. So yes, there will be vinyl, Phil.
Excellent. And hopefully you'll be able to put a little squiggle on a copy for me to put on Vinyl Revival in the future as well.
I will. Thank you, Phil.
That'd be lovely. Now, where can listeners follow you and buy your music, Chaz?
Okay, so I've got a website, chazjankel.com. That's one place you can get my music from, or you can get it from Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music. A lot of my music is up there. I mean, I've got my own YouTube channel, Instagram, Chaz Jankel 2018. I'm doing my best to kind of be out, have a profile. I'm a bit old school because I don't sort of, I'm not on social media every day. Well, I'm not posting, so, but there you go. It is out there. It's a lot of it's available. In fact, most of it's available. Yeah, there you go.
So get yourself over to chazjankel.com. Now, we're talking about vinyl there, Chaz. Now, you're waiting for this question. The Vinyl Revival is here, so I must ask you, what is the first vinyl record you ever bought, and what song would you play me now as your favourite if you had a record player beside you to put the needle on?
Right. So what was the first record I bought?
Yeah.
Ooh. I think, right. Okay. All right. I can't verify this because I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think I seem to remember buying. I can't say it's a bit embarrassing. All right, I'm gonna go on to the next one. I think could have been Apache by the Shadow.
Right.
I don't even know if that's true, but I remember having that.
What was the other one? Pinky and Perky.
I'm not gonna tell you. It could have been The Young Ones by Clifford.
Well, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. That the first record that I think that I bought was actually Cliff Richard and the Young. It was Cliff Richard and the Young Ones with Living Doll.
Oh, Living Doll.
That was 1986, I think. That was released for Comic Relief.
Living Doll. So I said The Young Ones, but actually I think it was Living Doll, which I don't know if I should admit too often. But it's not, well, what the hell? It's done now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Isn't that a coincidence? I was
out
just
there in the world, isn't it? God, that
It is.
Chaz Jankel. I'm not going to listen to him anymore.
Because he loves Living Doll. Oh, well, we've all got electric taste.
I remember once saying to Ian, he knew I liked Uptown Woman by Billy Joel, and he thought it was the worst taste.
Oh, it's lovely.
I think he thought, that's not very punk, is it? The opposite.
Completely opposite. I bet you he loved it secretly. I bet you did. He'd had it in his collection somewhere.
But listen,
now, you're not going to believe this.
What's that?
We've run out of time, Chaz. Would you believe it? So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining me on the show. And would you like to come on the show again? Have I frightened you away, Chaz?
Oh, thank you so much. It'd be great, Phil. I'd love that. My favourite album, just before it disappears, would be Sly and the Family Stone's Greatest Hits. Sly and the Family Stone's Greatest Hits. I would take that to a desert island with a little record player and with a nice sort of fresh juice to drink. I'd be a happy bunny.
Lovely, nice and relaxed as well with the cool tunes there.
Yeah.
Chaz, thank you so much for joining me. And finally, please could you introduce your latest single right now, please? And by the way, please hang around because we'll have a chat afterwards. Please could you introduce your latest single from D.O.A?
Hello, this is Chaz Jankel, and I'd just like to say thanks very much to Phil for a great interview. And I'd just like to say also, please take a listen to D.O.A. Reimagined, which is my latest release, and it's available wherever you look. It's out there. Thank you very much. Oh, it's D.O.A. Reimagined is the title. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chaz. We'll speak to you soon and all the best.
Thanks, Phil.